Ma'am, do not make this harder than it needs to be. I will put you on the ground if I have to. Officer Caleb Turner snapped at a calm black woman on a public sidewalk, completely unaware that the woman he was threatening could end his entire career with a single call to the Attorney General. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the busy city sidewalk outside the federal building, casting a warm glow over the steady movement of people coming and going. Cars passed in a constant rhythm, their engines blending into the background noise of conversation, footsteps, and distant sirens. It was an ordinary moment in an ordinary place, the kind of scene that passed without notice. Monica Hayes stepped out of the building with quiet purpose, her posture upright, her movements measured, her presence calm and composed. She carried a slim folder under her arm, her expression focused but relaxed, the kind of quiet confidence that did not demand attention, yet seemed to hold it anyway. She paused briefly at the edge of the sidewalk, adjusting her grip on the folder before stepping forward into the flow of pedestrians. Around her, people moved without hesitation, absorbed in their own routines. Nothing about her stood out. Nothing suggested disruption. Then, from behind, a voice cut sharply through the rhythm of the street. "Hey, you stop right there." The command was loud, abrupt, and unnecessary, drawing immediate attention from those nearby. Monica stopped. Slowly, she turned, her expression unchanged, her gaze steady as she faced the source of the voice. Officer Caleb Turner approached quickly, his steps heavy, his posture already tense, as if the situation had been decided before it even began. His partner, Officer Dylan Brooks, followed a step behind, his eyes scanning the area with more caution, his presence quieter but still aligned. Turner did not slow as he closed the distance. "Let me see your hands," he said, his voice sharp, authoritative, leaving no room for interpretation. Monica's hands remained visible at her sides. She did not move them suddenly. She did not react with alarm. "Is there a reason I have been stopped?" she asked calmly. The question was simple, measured, but immediately disrupted the tone Turner had set. He exhaled sharply, his jaw tightening as he stepped closer, his presence now fully intrusive. "You match a description," he replied quickly, though the details were noticeably absent. "That is enough for me to ask questions." Monica held his gaze, unblinking. "Then ask them," she said. The response was calm, controlled, and it landed differently than he expected. Around them, a few pedestrians slowed, their attention shifting, sensing the tension beginning to rise. Brooks glanced briefly at Turner, his hesitation subtle but present. Turner ignored it completely. He took another step forward, his voice rising slightly, pushing past the gap in his own reasoning. "I'm not going back and forth with you," he said. "You are going to cooperate." Monica did not move. She did not raise her voice. She simply stood there, calm, observant, her composure standing in stark contrast to the growing aggression in front of her. And in that moment, though nothing physical had yet happened, the balance of the situation had already begun to tilt. Not because of resistance, but because of the certainty with which one man had decided he was in control, without realizing just how quickly that control was about to disappear. The tension that had quietly begun to form now tightened with each passing second, stretching the ordinary sidewalk scene into something sharper, more focused. Officer Caleb Turner took another step forward, closing the distance in a way that was no longer procedural but deliberate. His presence filled the space between them, his posture wide, his tone carrying the weight of authority he was determined to enforce. "I said cooperate," he repeated, his voice louder now, cutting through the noise of the street and drawing more attention. A few pedestrians slowed, their eyes shifting toward the confrontation, their movements hesitant as they sensed something escalating beyond routine. Monica Hayes did not step back. She did not raise her voice. She simply held his gaze, her expression calm, her posture steady. "I am cooperating," she said. "I have stopped. I have answered you." The clarity in her response only seemed to agitate him further. Turner shook his head sharply, his jaw tightening. "No," he snapped. "You are questioning me." The distinction was not logical. It was emotional. He stepped closer again, his voice lowering but sharpening, the edge of it unmistakable. "And that is not how this works." Behind him, Officer Dylan Brooks shifted slightly, his eyes moving between Monica and Turner, the hesitation in his stance growing more visible. "Caleb, maybe we should just clarify the description first," he said quietly, his tone careful, controlled. Turner did not turn. "I do not need clarification," he replied immediately. "I know what I'm looking at." The certainty in his voice stood in direct contrast to the lack of evidence behind it. Monica's gaze remained steady, unflinching. "Then explain it," she said calmly. The request was simple, but it forced a pause, brief but real. Turner exhaled sharply, pushing past it. "I'm not here to explain anything to you," he said, his voice rising again. "I am here to determine if you are involved in something." The words were vague, undefined, yet delivered with full authority. Around them, more people had begun to notice. A woman near the curb slowed her pace, her phone lifting slightly, her attention fixed on the interaction. The atmosphere shifted subtly, the ordinary rhythm of the sidewalk disrupted by something more intense. Turner's hand moved, not to his radio, not to his notes, but toward Monica's arm. The motion was quick, controlled, but unnecessary. His fingers closed around her wrist with firm pressure, asserting control through contact. The reaction was immediate, a visible ripple through the nearby crowd, a quiet intake of breath from someone watching. Monica's body shifted slightly with the force, but she did not resist. She did not pull away. Instead, she looked down briefly at his hand, then back up at his face. "You need to let go," she said quietly. The tone was calm, but it carried weight. Turner did not release her. If anything, his grip tightened slightly, his need to dominate the moment now fully visible. "You do not tell me what to do," he replied, his voice low, tense. Brooks stepped closer now, his concern no longer subtle. "Caleb, we do not have grounds for this," he said, his voice more urgent. Turner ignored him completely. "You are making this harder than it needs to be," he said to Monica, his voice rising again, pushing past any remaining restraint. But Monica did not react to the pressure, the volume, or the attention now focused on them. She simply stood there, calm, composed, her presence grounded in something far deeper than the moment itself. And as the situation continued to escalate, not because of resistance, but because of decisions being made too quickly and without justification, it became clear that the line between authority and overreach had already begun to blur, and Turner was moving further across it with every second he refused to step back. The pressure of Officer Caleb Turner's grip did not ease. It settled deeper, more deliberate, as if his control over the situation depended entirely on maintaining physical dominance. Monica Hayes stood exactly where she was, her posture upright, her composure unbroken, her gaze steady even as the tension around them thickened. "Let go," she said again, her voice calm, precise, unchanged. The repetition did not raise in volume, but it sharpened in meaning. Turner's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as he leaned in slightly, his voice dropping into something colder, more personal. "You do not give me orders," he said. "I give them." The distinction hung in the air, heavy, unnecessary, but revealing. Around them, the sidewalk had begun to transform. What had been a flow of pedestrians was now a loose circle of witnesses, some standing still, others holding phones, capturing every second. The late afternoon light reflected off nearby windows, casting a sharp clarity over the scene that made every movement, every expression, impossible to ignore. Monica's arm shifted slightly under his grip, not in resistance, but in balance. "You are escalating without cause," she said. The words were simple, structured, and they landed differently than his commands, grounded, measured, undeniable. Turner exhaled sharply, his patience thinning into something more aggressive. "No," he snapped. "I am controlling the situation." Without warning, he pulled her arm forward slightly, guiding, no forcing, her one step off her original position on the sidewalk. The movement was small, but intentional. A line crossed. The reaction from the crowd was immediate. A low murmur, a subtle shift, the unmistakable awareness that what was happening was no longer routine. Officer Dylan Brooks stepped closer now, his voice no longer hesitant, but firm. "Caleb, we do not have probable cause," he said. Turner did not look at him, not even briefly. His focus remained locked on Monica, his authority now tied entirely to the decision he refused to question. "I said I have it handled," he replied, his tone rigid, final. Monica's gaze remained steady. "Handled is not the same as justified," she said quietly. The words cut cleanly through the tension. Turner's grip tightened again, his control slipping into something more forceful, more visible. "You are resisting," he said, though there was no resistance. The accusation came not from action, but from his need to justify what he was already doing. Monica did not react. She did not pull away. She simply stood there, calm, composed, her stillness now standing in stark contrast to his escalating aggression. "I am not resisting," she said. Turner's hand moved again, this time more abruptly, pushing her slightly toward the patrol car parked along the curb. The movement was sharper, less controlled, the boundary between procedure and force now fully blurred. The sound of a car door slamming somewhere down the street echoed faintly, amplifying the moment. Brooks stepped in closer, his voice urgent now. "Caleb, stop," he said. Turner ignored him again. Completely. "You're going to comply," he said, his voice louder, more forceful, as if volume could restore control. But Monica did not react to the pressure, the movement, or the crowd now fully focused on them. She simply stood there, her composure intact, her presence grounded in something far beyond the moment itself. And as Turner continued to push forward, physically, verbally, decisively, it became clear that he was no longer responding to the situation in front of him, but to his own need to maintain control, even as it slipped further away with every step he refused to reconsider. The force of the movement toward the patrol car shifted the entire atmosphere from tension into something unmistakably physical. Officer Caleb Turner's grip remained firm, guiding Monica Hayes forward with a pressure that no longer resembled procedure, but control enforced through contact. The edge of the curb came into view as he moved her closer to the vehicle, the door already within reach. "You are done talking," he said sharply, his voice raised again, louder than necessary, as if trying to drown out the growing awareness around them. "You are going in the car." The command landed with finality, but the space around them no longer accepted it so easily. Phones were now fully raised. Voices, once muted, carried quiet urgency. "Hey, that is not right," someone called out from the crowd. Another voice followed. "She is not resisting." The shift was undeniable. What had been a controlled interaction had become a public moment of scrutiny. Turner's jaw tightened, his grip adjusting again as if he could force the situation back into order. "Step in," he ordered, pulling the rear door open with a sharp motion. Monica did not immediately move. She remained standing just outside the vehicle, her posture upright, her gaze steady, her composure unchanged despite the pressure. "On what charge?" she asked calmly. The question cut through the noise, precise, unavoidable. Turner's expression hardened instantly. "Obstruction," he replied quickly. "Failure to comply." The words came fast, assembled in the moment rather than grounded in fact. Monica held his gaze. "You have not established that," she said. The statement was simple, but it landed with weight. Turner's grip tightened again, his patience thinning into frustration. "You do not get to establish anything here," he snapped. "Edo." Without warning, he pushed her forward, not violently, but forcefully enough to make the intent unmistakable. Her body shifted slightly with emotion, but she did not resist. She did not brace. She simply absorbed the movement, her balance steady, her presence grounded. Behind them, Officer Dylan Brooks stepped in closer now, his voice urgent. "Caleb, stop," he said. "This is not going to hold." Turner did not turn. He did not respond. His focus remained locked on completing the action, on finishing what he had started. "Get in," he repeated. Monica remained still for one more second, her gaze lifting briefly to the crowd, then back to him. "You are making this worse," she said quietly. The words were not raised, but they carried certainty. Turner let out a short, sharp breath, his voice tightening. "No," he replied. "I am ending it." The distinction mattered to him, even if it no longer reflected reality. Around them, the crowd had shifted fully from passive observers to witnesses, the weight of the moment pressing into every movement, every word. And in that space, as Turner pushed forward, physically, decisively convinced he was closing the situation, it became clear that he was not ending anything at all. He was committing to it. Every step, every decision, every action now moving beyond correction and into consequence, while Monica Hayes remained exactly as she had been from the beginning, calm, composed, and quietly aware that the outcome of this moment had already been decided, just not by him. The force of the push toward the patrol car did not stop at the door. Officer Caleb Turner tightened his grip and, with a sharp motion, pressed Monica Hayes forward again, his hand now firmly against her upper back, guiding her down just enough to force compliance. "I said get in," he snapped, his voice rising, the edge of control now slipping into visible aggression. The movement drew a louder reaction from the crowd. "Hey, that is too much," a voice called out. Another voice followed, more urgent. "You cannot do that." Phones shifted closer, capturing every angle. The moment was no longer contained. It was exposed. Monica's body absorbed the force, her balance steady, her posture still controlled even as the pressure increased. She did not resist. She did not struggle. Instead, she placed one hand lightly against the door frame, stabilizing herself before straightening again. Her calmness only seemed to irritate Turner further. "Stop bracing and move," he said sharply, misreading control as defiance. Behind him, Officer Dylan Brooks stepped in closer, his voice no longer hesitant but firm. "Caleb, enough," he said. "She is not resisting." Turner ignored him completely. "You are obstructing," he repeated, as if the label itself justified everything. Without warning, he grabbed her wrist again, pulling it behind her back in a quick, controlled motion. The movement was forceful, unnecessary, and unmistakably escalatory. A sharp metallic sound followed as he reached for his cuffs, the familiar click echoing against the side of the vehicle. The crowd reacted immediately, murmurs rising, tension sharpening. Monica's arm moved with the force, but she did not pull away. She allowed the motion, her composure intact, her breathing steady. "You are escalating beyond lawful authority," she said calmly. Turner did not respond to the words. He secured one cuff, then the other, the final click sealing the moment in full view of everyone watching. He stepped back slightly, his chest rising, as if the act itself restored his control. "Now we are done," he said, his voice firm, though thinner than before. But Monica did not look at him. She looked past him, toward the crowd, toward the phones, toward the witnesses. Then she turned her head slightly back toward him. "You are not ending anything," she said quietly. Turner shook his head, dismissing it, though the tension in his posture had changed. "No," he replied. "I just did." The certainty in his voice was forced now, louder than necessary. Brooks stood beside them, silent, his expression tight, fully aware that something had gone too far. And in that moment, as the cuffs tightened around Monica's wrists and the crowd captured every second, it became clear that what Turner believed was control had become something else entirely. Something recorded, witnessed, and already moving beyond him, toward consequences he could no longer contain. The metallic click of the cuffs had barely settled when the noise of the street seemed to pull back, as if the entire scene had stepped into a quieter, more focused space. Monica Hayes stood beside the patrol car, her wrists secured behind her, her posture still upright, her composure unchanged. The crowd remained, phones raised, voices lowered into tense murmurs. Officer Caleb Turner adjusted his stance, exhaling sharply as if the act itself had restored order. though the tension in his shoulders suggested otherwise. He reached for his radio again, pressing the button with deliberate force. "Dispatch. I have one in custody for obstruction and failure to comply," he said, his voice controlled but edged, as though he needed the words to solidify what had just happened. "Transporting now." The response crackled faintly, barely audible, but enough to complete the sequence in his mind. He clipped the radio back, then turned toward Monica, his expression rigid. "That is how this ends," he said. The statement was final. Or at least, he believed it was. Monica did not respond immediately. She stood still for a moment, her gaze forward, her breathing steady. Then, slowly, she turned her head just enough to look at him. "Officer Turner," she said. Her voice was calm, measured. It cut through the noise without effort. He paused. Not fully. Just enough. "What?" he replied, his tone sharp, defensive. Monica held his gaze. "You still had an opportunity to stop," she said. The words were not loud. They did not need to be. They carried weight. Turner let out a short laugh, shaking his head as he stepped closer again. "Stop what?" he replied. "This is already done." Monica's expression did not change. "No," she said quietly. "What you have done is already recorded. What you do next will determine how far this goes." The distinction lingered in the air, heavy, precise. Brooks shifted beside them, his unease now fully visible. "Caleb, we should slow this down," he said, his voice low, urgent. Turner did not look at him. "No," he replied. "We are finishing it." He reached for the patrol car door, pulling it open with a sharp motion, then turned back toward Monica. "Get in," he ordered. Monica did not move immediately, not out of resistance, but in tension. "You are about to take a step that you cannot correct," she said. Turner's grip on the door tightened, his patience thinning into irritation. "You keep saying that," he snapped. "It does not mean anything." Monica's gaze remained steady. "It does," she replied. "Just not to you." The words settled deeper than anything before them. For a fraction of a second, Turner hesitated. Then he pushed past it. He stepped closer, guiding her toward the open door, his voice firm, final. "We are done here," he said. Monica allowed the movement, her posture still controlled, her presence unchanged. "Then you have made your decision," she said quietly. Turner nodded once, sharp, certain. "I have," he replied. And with that, he moved to close the door, unaware that in dismissing the final warning, he had just sealed the outcome of everything that would follow, stepping beyond the last moment where anything could have been undone. The patrol car door had barely begun to close when a voice cut sharply across the sidewalk, precise, controlled, and unmistakably authoritative. "Officer Turner, step away from the vehicle." The command did not echo. It did not need to. It carried enough weight to stop everything in place. Turner froze mid-motion, his hand still on the door, his grip tightening instinctively before slowly loosening. He turned, standing a few feet away, phone still in hand. Monica Hayes was no longer looking at him the way she had before. The calm remained, but something beneath it had shifted, sharpened, defined. The call was still connected. "Yes," she said into the phone, her tone precise, no longer conversational, but official. "He has escalated beyond lawful authority. I am confirming location and badge number now." The words landed with a clarity that cut through the entire scene. The crowd went silent. Completely. Turner's expression faltered. Not fully. Not yet. But enough. What were you doing?" he asked, his voice lower now, uncertain, stripped of the force it once carried. Monica did not look at him immediately. She finished the call with a brief, measured statement. "Understood." Then she lowered the phone. When her eyes met his again, there was no ambiguity left. "Monica Hayes," she said calmly. "Senior Federal Investigator. Direct liaison to the Attorney General." The sentence did not need emphasis. It carried its own gravity. Turner blinked. Once. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The certainty he had held onto moments ago fractured all at once, his posture shifting as the realization forced its way in. "No, that is not," he started, but the words collapsed under their own weight. Brooks stepped back instinctively, his eyes widening as the meaning settled faster for him. "Caleb," he said quietly. But Turner did not respond. His focus was locked on Monica, on the phone still in her hand, on the calm certainty in her voice. The sound of approaching vehicles cut through the silence next. Not distant, not uncertain. Immediate. Multiple engines, controlled, coordinated. The shift in the air was undeniable. Turner took a small step back, then another, his hand dropping completely from the door. The authority he had carried was gone. Not challenged. Removed. You should have said something, he muttered, his voice uneven. Monica's response came without hesitation. You were told to stop, she said. The distinction landed harder than anything else. The first vehicle pulled up, then another. Doors opened with sharp, deliberate precision. Figure stepped out, command presence, controlled movement, no hesitation. The scene transformed instantly. Turner stood there, no longer in control of anything. His breathing shallow, his posture collapsed. The same space where he had asserted dominance now surrounded him with something far greater. Authority he could not argue with, could not overpower, could not ignore. And standing in front of him, exactly where she had been from the beginning, Monica Hayes remained calm, composed, and completely beyond his reach, as the full consequence of his actions settled in with a finality he could no longer escape. The sound of doors slamming shut in rapid succession echoed across the sidewalk as multiple black vehicles came to a precise stop, their engines cutting off almost in unison. The atmosphere shifted instantly, not with chaos, but with control, measured, deliberate, absolute. Men in dark suits stepped out, their movements synchronized, their presence commanding without a single raised voice. Officer Caleb Turner stood frozen, his hands still hovering near the patrol car door, his body no longer responding with confidence, but hesitation. Step away from her, one of the agents said, his tone calm, but leaving no room for delay. Turner obeyed. Immediately. No argument. No resistance. His feet moved before his mind caught up, creating distance between himself and Monica Hayes, the same woman he had just restrained minutes earlier. The contrast was immediate and undeniable. One of the agents stepped forward, his eyes scanning the scene quickly, then settling on Monica. "Ma'am," he said respectfully, "we have it from here." Monica gave a small nod, her composure unchanged, her presence steady. Behind her, the faint metallic sound of handcuffs being unlocked broke through the silence. The restraint was removed quickly, efficiently, the same instrument of control now reversed into correction. Turner's breath caught as he watched, his chest tightening as the realization deepened with every second. "You cannot just," he began, but the words failed him before they could form. The agent turned to him, his gaze sharp, unwavering. "You have already done enough," he said. The statement was quiet, but it carried finality. Two agents stepped behind Turner, their hands firm, controlled, guiding his arms back, not aggressively, but with authority that did not need force. The cold click of restraints closing around his wrists echoed across the sidewalk, sharp and unmistakable. The same sound he had used now defined him. The crowd reacted in hushed disbelief, phones still raised, capturing every second of the reversal. Turner's posture collapsed further, his shoulders dropping, his voice gone completely as the reality of the situation settled over him in full. "This will be reviewed the highest level," the lead agent said, his tone measured, professional. "You are relieved of duty, effective immediately." The words landed with precision, dismantling what remained of Turner's authority. Officer Dylan Brooks stood a few feet away, silent, his expression tight, the weight of what had just unfolded clear in his eyes. He did not step forward. He did not intervene. He simply watched, understanding fully now what had been crossed. Monica adjusted her sleeve calmly, her movements smooth, controlled, reclaiming the space that had been taken from her. She did not need to raise her voice. She did not need to assert anything further. The authority had already spoken. And as Turner stood there, restrained, surrounded, stripped of everything he had relied on, the scene settled into something undeniable, a quiet, precise restoration of order, where every action taken in arrogance had returned with clarity, leaving no room for argument, no room for escape, only consequence. As the agent secured Officer Caleb Turner and guided him toward the waiting vehicle, the tension that had once gripped the sidewalk began to loosen, slowly at first, like something tightly wound finally releasing. The sharp edge of confrontation softened into a quiet, steady calm, the kind that settles only after everything has been seen, understood, and resolved. The flashing lights that had once dominated the scene now felt distant, less urgent, their reflections fading against the glass windows of the government building. Monica Hayes stood where she had been, her posture upright, her composure unchanged, as if the chaos that had surrounded her had never truly touched her. One of the agents stepped closer, his tone respectful. "Ma'am, everything is being handled," he said. Monica gave a small nod, acknowledging without ceremony. There was no need for reassurance. The outcome had already begun the moment the call was made. Around them, the crowd slowly began to shift, phones lowering, voices returning in hushed tones. The energy of the space had changed, not chaotic, not tense, but aware. People who had witnessed the escalation now stood quietly, absorbing what had followed, their expressions reflecting something deeper than curiosity, understanding. Officer Dylan Brooks remained off to the side, his posture still, his gaze lowered briefly before lifting again toward Monica. He did not speak. He did not need to. The weight of what had unfolded was enough. Monica adjusted the sleeve of her jacket with a smooth, deliberate motion, restoring the small details that had been disrupted. Her movements were precise, controlled, the same quiet rhythm she had carried from the beginning. She looked once toward the street, taking in the scene, the vehicles, the agents, the people, before turning back toward the building she had exited moments earlier. As she began to walk, her steps were unhurried, steady, her presence unchanged. The space around her shifted subtly, people moving aside without being asked, creating a path not out of fear, but respect. No one stopped her. No one questioned her. The moment had already spoken for itself. Behind her, the last of the agents began to clear the scene, their movements efficient, their purpose fulfilled. The sound of engines starting again was softer now, less intrusive, blending back into the normal rhythm of the city. And as Monica Hayes reached the entrance of the building and stepped inside, the door closing quietly behind her, the sidewalk returned to its ordinary flow. People resumed their movement, conversations picked back up, the world continuing forward. But something remained, a quiet, undeniable clarity that lingered in the air. Not loud, not forceful, but present. A reminder that true authority does not need to be asserted, and that when justice arrives, it does so with a calm precision that leaves everything exactly where it belongs. What makes this story powerful is not simply that authority stepped in at the right moment, but how close everything came to being normalized before it did. Officer Turner did not act in a vacuum. He acted in public, with witnesses, with a partner who hesitated and still believed that his version of control would hold. That is what makes the moment unsettling. It shows how easily certainty can override restraint when no one interrupts it early enough. Monica Hayes did not overpower him. She did something far more precise. She allowed his decisions to fully reveal themselves, knowing that once they were visible, they could no longer be defended. And when she made that call, it did not create justice. It simply activated it. The system did not suddenly become powerful. It had always been there, waiting for the moment when it could no longer be ignored. That is the deeper truth here, that real accountability does not need to chase wrongdoing. It waits for it to complete itself, and then it responds with clarity that cannot be undone. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.